All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another deep dive. Today I have on, I guess, Joe. How do you go? Yeah. And he's with Hoyu, and today he's going to be talking to us about what they're building over there. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. So yeah, I have this complicated name of Jogundas, but Joe is really fine. And we are gonna dive into Hoyu, which is the thing that I'm working on at the moment.
So I guess the first question would be like, how long have you been working on it? And what was sort of the goal as far as what got you into building this thing?
Yeah, so we have been working on this project for almost a year now. We started back in September last year. The idea here is to build a new DeFi primitive because basically not a lot of protocols that are currently active are just completely independent from anything outside the protocol, and not many protocols are completely permissionless in the sense that you can do whatever you want with them. So the goal is to kind of try to do a little bit of progress on that vector.
Nice. And I think we'll call you're basically, the tagline is oracleless DeFi, right? Or
Well, so the tagline has maybe evolved a little bit, but the the goal is to have a lending market, also known as a money market, which does not depend on any external components. So an oracle, a liquidator, things like that, these are kind of external to the lending protocol, and we want to build a protocol which does not have any such external components.
and why is that? I get almost the oracle piece, but then even liquidators you would consider, I guess, a bad thing.
Well, so the bigger kind of ideological line here is that current architecture that virtually all lending markets or money markets use, this architecture does not know anything about the liquidity of the collateral. And I think that this is wrong. This is not how it should be, because like if I'm giving you a loan, then not only I know what your assets are worth, but I also have to know, like, if you default, will I be able to sell the collateral? And if I don't know that, like, why would I give you a loan? So somehow that's the starting point. And then from this starting point, we kind of arrived at a setup where we are like really different from the others and really self-contained. And that's the reason why the oracles went away, and also the reason why we have no liquidators in the system either.
Cool. And how big's the team now?
Yeah, so I mean, in principle, we are open to anybody helping, but we are. I'm one person, and there is another one who is working full time on the project. There are a bunch of people who kind of keep on talking with us, suggesting ideas and helping in various directions. But when it comes to people involved in the project full time, it's only 2 people.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I met you. What event did I meet you at? It was
Yeah, we met in Prague in the
Prague, DeFi
DeFi
Prague.
Prague, I think.
Yes. Yeah, and he was one of the super smart guys giving a speech out there, and I'm super happy to have you on. But
Such a pleasure, such a pleasure, Nick.
yeah, so anyway, let's get into building out Hoyu. So what's like the ideal use case? Like what's the most standard use case you could build out of this? I guess building a lending protocol, right? So
Right. So maybe a good way to depict what Hoyu is to kind of zoom into a single market. And
yep.
in this terminology, a market is something that has to do with a pair of tokens. And this market consists of 2 blocks. So one block is the trading market, like a DEX, and another block is a lending market. Those 2 markets operate in a single kind of coherent way when it comes to a pair of tokens.
So we should draw a DEX over here. We should draw, lending market over here.
Looks good.
All right. So what do users want to do?
So users typically want to do several things, and there are like 4 different roles when it comes to Hoyu. So maybe let's start from the roles that are well known, that basically work for protocols like Uniswap as well. So these 2 roles are liquidity providers, or LPs, and then traders, people who
Okay.
want to do swaps.
So we'll put an LP, and we'll put a trader over here. And so like what pair should we do? What would be a good pair for doing this? ETH USDC, or do we want a less liquid pair? I guess that what this is
We
built
probably
for.
want to use a less liquid pair as an example. I mean, I typically think about pairs where one token is an altcoin, just a small token, a niche token, and another token is a stable coin. So we can do like alt for altcoin and cur for stablecoin for currency, for example, or we can go with anything more concrete.
So like maybe like TRB USDC.
Sounds good?
All right, we'll do TRB USDC. And so over here on the DEX, okay. And then so we have those 2 guys. Who are our other 2 guys?
Right. So the pair is both for the DEX and for the lending market. I mean, it kind of the lending market and the DEX have to do with the same pair. But now the other 2 guys are well, lenders and borrowers.
Okay, so we have a lender and a borrower. Okay, and so what do they want to do? He wants to borrow TRB or borrow USDC? Which one?
Right. So the borrower wants, they do have some TRB, and they don't want to dump them. They want to lock them in as collateral, the TRB. And for this collateral, they want to borrow some USDC.
Okay, so he has TRB and he wants to borrow USDC.
That's right.
Yep. All right. So what does he do?
So he basically interacts with the lending market, and by interacts, I mean he deposits some TRB into the lending market, and in order for him to borrow USDC from that same lending market, there has to be some USDC to start with. And
So that would be this guy putting some USDC in.
that's right. That would be the lender. So the lender puts USDC in, and in return for that, the lender gets some HUSDC, some sort of depository note, which then will allow them to get the deposit back at some later point in time in the future.
So he could trade that around theoretically.
Right. I mean, so what's interesting here is that this USDC, which is then locked in the lending market, it might be somewhat illiquid in the sense that there are periods of time where the lender cannot actually retrieve their USDC back if all of the USDC that they put in is lent out. But there is a guarantee on the smart contract level that they will never lose their USDC. So if they are willing to wait, the lenders will always be able to get their USDC back.
Right. Because if he has this HUSDC and then this guy borrows it, he can't get it out right away.
That's right. I mean,
So,
there are different ways to solve it, but I mean, we went with the simplest approach.
okay. So now, I guess, how do we decide how much USDC he gets? That would be like the question, right?
Yes, so that's kind of the key to any operations when it comes to lending and borrowing. So there are, again, many different ways to do it, but the way that we went ahead with is that we use the DEX and the spot price in the DEX to evaluate the price of the collateral. So for example, if you are putting like, I don't know, like 1,000 TRB into the lending market, then we have to know how much that is worth in terms of USDC, and we use the DEX price to get that number. Now, when we have that number, we can look at things like loan to value, or the LTV ratio. And there is, again, a lot of freedom there, but we basically want to do loans at 90% LTV for any asset. which might sound strange because like other lending markets do differentiate between different assets. But for us, anything that has a DEX pair is more or less the same level of safety.
So, and do you get the spot price? Is that like, do you plug in, like if I wanted to trade 1,000 TRB on the DEX, what's the price? Or do you just get the current spot price?
Yeah, so the latter. So we just look at the reserves and get the spot price. I
Okay.
mean, there are some subtleties involved, but basically that's kind of the big picture. And this also has an implicit question, I guess. Basically, what happens if I have to sell the collateral? And I mean, that's the reason why we have an LTV which is not 100%.
So if you put in, so like, he'll deposit 1,000 TRB and he'll get out 90% of that worth in USDC, right?
That's correct.
So
That's right. So yeah, I don't know if you want to use a particular price, but if you go for like 1 USDC per TRB, then the math is going to be simple, I guess. But
yep. So yeah, we can do that. Like let's say TRB is $1. It's not, but we can say it is. Then you would get out like 900 USDC.
That's right. That's right.
And then basically this is the problem usually with normal lending protocols. If the value of this TRB drops below 900 USDC, then any liquidator could come in and liquidate it, right?
That's correct. So basically, that's the way a normal,
Yep.
a typical lending market works. And that's also the point in time where the oracle comes in handy, because in order to understand if a liquidator has the right to do a liquidation, you have to somehow get the data from the oracle. But that's not the case here. So here, what happens is, as LPs change their positions, so for example, as the LPs add liquidity or remove liquidity, or as the traders perform swaps, the lending market gets new information. That's because
so let's say the price drops. You know, if price goes down 15%, what happens?
Right. So what are the cases when the price can go down? So these are, for example, swaps. So for example, a trader came along and they decided to dump some TRB on the DEX side, just because they want to sell that TRB. So what would happen in Hoyu would be that before the swap itself is executed, the DEX would send a function call to the lending market saying like, look, if I execute the swap, then the price is going to go down by 15%. Like, is that okay? And in this case, this is not okay, because you are at the you're at the level where you're barely collateralized, so you have maxed out your LTV. And if there is any like price drop, if the price goes below $1, well, if the price of TRB goes below $1, then basically your loan has to be liquidated. So in this case, if a trader comes along, wants to sell any amount of TRB, even if it's a very small amount, just before the swap gets executed, the DEX calls the lending market, and the lending market liquidates the loan. So the loan gets liquidated first, and only then does the swap get actually executed.
Basically, the loan would get liquidated by how? Then this USDC would be clawed back?
Or
no,
yeah,
or basically you would sell this TRB first.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
So the lending market would sell its TRB on the DEX first. So that's what we call a loan liquidation. And only then would the trader be kind of allowed to continue or finalize their swap.
So then the trader would get, so this DEX isn't like a unipool. This is built into Hoyu.
That's right. So that's why I was talking about like a single market, which consists of two parts, of the DEX part and the lending market part. These parts are really tightly integrated, as you have already seen, because like function calls on one side just immediately query the other side as well.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. So then the trader would necessarily get a worse price than this one, right?
That's right.
Because he
So,
went and he liquidated a whole bunch.
so the trader plays the role of a liquidator in some sense.
Yep.
And the incentives are somewhat strange here because basically, why would the trader trade here if
Yeah,
they
that
would
was my
get this
question.
much worse price, right? But maybe the thing to think about here is traders already get different prices on different markets. That's kind of one. And another one is that depending on the size of the trade and the fees that the market is giving, there is already some some slippage, but also some gap between buy and sell prices. So of course, if this is like one of the very many markets of this TRB token, and this market gives the worst price of them all, the trader will not trade here. So that's for sure. But I mean, we are mostly thinking about tokens which have a large part of their liquidity in a single decentralized market. And if this is the only market where you can trade, then well, you either trade or you just decide that, okay, I'm just gonna wait for somebody else to do the liquidation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, could you run into a scenario where like you had a whole bunch of liquidations right here, and you knew like, listen, if I want to trade even one USDC, I'm gonna get, there's gonna be a 20% drop in price, and so like how would you do that? Or I guess would basically like
Yeah,
somebody you would want to like, yeah, I don't know, like
no, but
what
this is again a very good question, and I mean, so basically the algebra works such that this LTV, this 90%, kind of also determines the limit, the lending limit, because you can't just lend out like infinite amount of money just because there is a finite amount of liquidity on the DEX side. So if LTV is 90%, then basically you can only lend out 10% of the DEX liquidity um, uh, if you want to kind of use the spot price. That's just how the Uni
Yep.
V2 sort of math works. So basically, if on the DEX side you have like, I don't know, like 1 million USDC, then it doesn't matter how much the the lenders have deposited on the lending market. The biggest amount that all the borrowers can collectively borrow is going to be 10% of that, so like 100K USDC.
So if okay, so basically if there's 1 million over here, the lender would never put in more than 100K, right?
Well, the lender can put in however much they want, but the borrower, or like collectively all the borrowers, they won't be able to borrow more than 0.1 million.
Right.
So this is a limitation on the one hand. On the other hand, if you think of how a lending market works, they try to just do that implicitly. They try to kind of have a DAO, which then limits the supply cap, it changes the supply cap of the kind of particular assets in order to adjust it and keep it in line with the liquidity that is available on some DEXs. We try to do that explicitly. And so like fixing the LTV fixes the amount that you can borrow, and it also fixes the price impact. So at an LTV of 90%, the price impact is, if I'm not mistaken, like 20%. So if all the loans got liquidated at once, the price drop you can have at most is, I think, 20%.
Okay, cool. And yeah, so I guess the people, like if there is a liquidation, like are there penalties to anyone in here for liquidations?
Yeah, so things that we have thought a lot about are basically incentives. So in a traditional lending market, the liquidators, they have to be awarded some reward. I mean, they have to be paid for their work, basically,
Right.
because if they're not, then nobody will do any liquidations. Here, it's a bit different. So, of course, like liquidations are bad for borrowers because presumably they expected not to be liquidated, but now they are liquidated, so maybe they feel bad about it. On the other hand, the system allows us to kind of liquidate only as much collateral as really is needed and do something else with the rest. So for example, return it to the borrower if you
okay.
want. So, but okay, maybe let's leave it aside because this is pretty complicated. But somehow borrower is like one party to a liquidation, another party is the lender. So the lenders have this guarantee that they will never lose the USDC that they have provided. So the liquidation must be such that the lenders are always made whole at the end. They do not have any incentives, so they do not prefer being like parties to a liquidation, but they're going to be made whole. So they are kind of neutral when it comes to liquidations. Traders and LPs, well, I mean, ideally they would like to avoid liquidations because for traders they get a worse price if they want to kind of sell TRB, and LPs presumably also don't really like liquidations too much because this means that their capital gets converted from USDC to TRB, which maybe is not ideal depending on how they want to position themselves. So basically, we are trying to keep the protocol as neutral as possible with regards to liquidations, but still the traders or the LPs or whoever interacts with the DEX or the lending market, they will have to pay gas fees for liquidations. And basically the protocol has to be useful enough for them such that they do want to pay those gas fees and perform those liquidations.
Yeah. So
Not sure
basically,
if it's possible to put it into the drawing, but yeah.
well, I mean, the trader basically would have to pay the gas fees, right? Or the trader or the LPs would have increased gas fees.
Right. So I would say that maybe everybody has increased gas fees just
Everybody.
because, like, even if there is no liquidation, there is a liquidation check.
Right.
So that increases the gas fees by a bit. It's like, I would say it's lower increase than one would expect. It's maybe tens of thousands of gas and not like,
Oh, that's
maybe
not bad.
hundreds of thousands. Yeah, so it's not too bad,
Yeah.
and we had to put in a lot of work there. But yeah, gas fees are elevated.
Yeah, and I mean the LPs too, like they would every time they would withdraw, like would it do liquidations? Like let's say the spot price goes up, the spot price of TRB right doubles, and then he just lowers all of his liquidity. You know, he still liquidate people by just lowering the amount of liquidity he's providing?
Yes, so that's another mechanism which is very particular to Hoyu, I guess.
Yeah.
So other lending markets, they only look at the spot price, and if the spot price is high, then okay, no liquidations. For Hoyu, it's different because like we're liquidity aware, the lending market will only do liquidations through this DEX and not some other liquidity pool. So if the liquidity on this DEX goes down, there will be liquidations. And that's basically an attack vector. So some evil LP could just try to remove all the liquidity, try to liquidate the borrowers that way, and try to construct an attack which basically benefits them just because of their positioning. We are trying to prevent that by having a burn period. So the liquidity provider redeem period, which is not a single block, and instead it's basically 1 week. So providing liquidity is instantaneous. You can do that in a single block, but removing liquidity or burning the LP tokens, that is a process that takes some time.
A whole
And
week. That's how'd you come upon a week? You know, like I would think you would just do like, 10 minutes or something to prevent like intra-block attacks.
right. I mean, well, so this is still maybe not set completely in stone, but the reason for a longer period of time is because there are these borrowers, and they presumably want to know that they're going to be liquidated
Okay.
at the spot price, which is just very high, and presumably they don't want to be liquidated like in 10 minutes without having any fault of their own. So that's why we need to have a period which is like long enough. There's probably going to be an interesting dynamics with rug pulls, because doing a rug pull that lasts a week is not very attractive
Yeah.
to people doing rug pulls. So then maybe this means that people who want to do rug pulls would not be using our system, basically.
Another big downfall. This is
Huge downside for
yeah,
a protocol. No
huge
rug pulls
downside.
there. Not a lot of entertainment value then.
No, this is super cool. And so yeah, what would be, you know, I guess people, the reason that you would launch this would be, you know, like if you're a new coin and you want to have a lending product market built in, and you also don't have a DEX, this would likely be a good option for you because you don't need, you know, to go find an oracle to give you a price feed. You don't need, you know, basically anything else to sort of set up. It would be relatively quick. You would just have to provide some initial liquidity and then let it go, right?
That's right. So basically what we saw is that two products that are getting a lot of use in DeFi are DEXs and lending markets. And any sort of token that has access to a lending market, they just immediately start using that lending market. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, if you look at the lending markets which are popular now, they're only serving like really large tokens. And that's reasonable because smaller tokens have huge volatility, not a lot of liquidity, and then it's like very troublesome to issue loans with that small token as collateral. Whereas here in Hoyu, we are basically saying that, look, you can just create your own market. There's going to be a DEX, there's going to be a lending market, and you're able to do that for any token completely permissionlessly, just like Uni V2 allows you to create a pair for any two tokens, like with no additional checks.
Well, could you build this in like Uni V4 though? Like with the hooks?
Definitely, you could definitely
Yeah.
do that. I mean, that would be even more complex than this, just because Uni V4 allows concentrated liquidity. We are not allowing concentrated liquidity here. The argument for that is because smaller tokens from the people that we talk to, the teams that care about small tokens, they typically don't really want to spend time like administering like concentrated liquidity positions. That's on the one hand, and on the other hand, these very concentrated positions are kind of easier to attack, just because the price response becomes very nonlinear. Like there is
Right.
a resistance, and then after this resistance is breached, the price changes dramatically.
Yeah. Cool. I guess another issue that I could think of would be like, let's say you start this, you know, Teller started this 4 years ago, right when we launched. But then we get a Coinbase or a Binance listing. And now all of a sudden 90% of our liquidity moves over to Binance. What would be sort of the downfall here? Wouldn't this basically just get almost the worst of both worlds or completely go away?
Well, I mean, so Binance will not allow you to use this lending market functionality. I mean, at some point they might build something like that, and okay, centralized lending market is probably something that people are also going to be interested in. But in general, if you want to cater to some people on chain, and well, presumably tokens are there because people want to use those tokens on some blockchain and also hopefully want to trade them and do other things with them on blockchains, then Hoyu would still be useful. Like, okay, there's going to be some slippage issues and some like price gaps which are not there on the centralized exchange side. But if you look at a kind of a price line of a smaller token, you will see that these guys, they experience 20% jumps quite frequently. And this is what we are aiming towards. So basically, since everything is open source, and if we get the parameters really wrong, and it turns out that it should be like 95% LTV instead of 90% LTV, then okay, somebody can just kind of fork us and launch their own protocol where the numbers are actually much better.
Love it. Yeah. And then where are fees? Are there any fees in the system? You know, like are there LP fees, trading fees, lending, borrowing?
Yeah, so we are trying to be as simple as possible here. So on the DEX side, the LPs are gonna have the typical 0.3% fee. It's possible to go with much lower and much higher, but I mean, that's just the kind of traditional fee. So that's what we are sticking with. then on the lending market side, there's going to be the initial fee. So somehow opening a loan will cost, or like borrowing will cost a fixed fee of 0.5%. So that is in here to benefit the protocol, first of all, and then second, it's also to prevent kind of loan spamming attacks, because you can imagine a situation where somebody just tries to create a lot of really tiny loans just to kind of increase the gas fees for everybody else. And then the last component is going to be a kind of a time-based interest. So there's going to be an interest rate that the borrower has to pay. So the longer they keep the loan open, the more they will have to pay back.
And then this is based on market conditions, right? So how much USDC is in here?
Right. So that's the current thinking, but a more simple way to go would be just fix a number like 10% annually or something like that. So that's also possible. That's not something that we have completely settled on yet.
Yeah, you could just put it on a curve too. Make it. But then
Yeah.
it's variable, which is, yeah.
Right. I mean, some people don't like variable. And I mean, even if we fix the fee to say 10%, there's going to be a variability of returns to the lenders, just because if you like, okay, let's say like 10,000 USDC has been borrowed, but then if I think that 10% fee is like attractive to me, I can try to put in more USDC just to kind of dilute the pool, and then the return to the lenders on average will go down, but I will capture this, a part of this as a new lender. So there is this kind of variability anyway, but it's for the lenders only, not for the borrowers.
Nice. Cool. All right. So what am I missing? Like that, I think I have a good idea, right? Or am I missing any big pieces in the protocol?
I think the overall use case and the product side, this we covered pretty well. I think like one other interesting aspect is that this sort of protocol is the perfect protocol for denial of service attacks when it comes to gas, because like you could try to construct a position in terms of LP kind of, and also borrowing and lending actions where moving the protocol forward in time would cost more gas than you could just have in a single ETH block. So we spend a lot of time to try to kind of prevent those attacks. And like one of the key mechanisms here is that the liquidation process, that one scales not with the number of loans, but it kind of scales with the price movements. So like each loan is put in somewhere in some bucket, which has to do with the spot price. And this kind of changes the scaling and then prevents a lot of those attacks. So hopefully we will end up with a really solid protocol, which is resilient to both economic attacks, say kind of trying to force liquidations when they shouldn't happen and so on, but also with respect to various technical attacks like these denial of service gas kind of attacks.
Cool. Yeah, and then you could just add like a fee somewhere and then have a governance token, right? And then that's
great question as
right.
well. But this is so this is something that I really want to avoid. I mean, on-chain governance, I mean, it has its benefits, but it surely also has like a lot of downsides. And so I'm not a big fan of on-chain governance, and I'm even less of a fan of this whole decentralization theater where people try to pretend that everything is decentralized. So this protocol, as we see it now, should really be kind of permissionless. It should really be open source, and there's going to be no governance. So the token, if there ever is a token, this will not be a governance token. It will be just kind of a pure utility token, just to make this mechanism work. Just pay some fee and just use it. That's going to be the end of it.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I could see like, do you have a way for protocols like, let's say we wanted, we started TRV and we wanted to sort of incentivize LPing or, liquidating it. Could you add a bunch of rewards in Because I could see that being positive for early protocols for sure.
Yeah, totally. But I mean, this does not necessarily have to be done on chain, and
Oh, sure.
even if done on chain, it does not have to be necessarily done like in the scope of these smart contracts that govern trading and lending. I mean, it can be just a kind of some outside smart contracts or some completely different system where the user can basically just claim their rewards without interacting with these two smart contracts.
Nice. Yeah,
So
no, I'm good.
So there definitely are like lots of add-ons and like things that you could build on top of that. But our goal is to basically have a protocol which is usable and which provides those four different types of users. So the LPs, traders, lenders, and borrowers with a basic functionality that we think they actually want to use.
Yeah, and then the last question obviously is how do we make a stable coin off of this? Right?
Yeah, so that's a lovely question. I mean, I have been thinking about stablecoin designs, and well, you have shared another paper on oracleless stablecoins with me, and that's very interesting. So I think that there is a lot to explore in the stablecoin space. Lending and borrowing has a lot to do with stablecoins, just because like if I have something that is backed by some collateral, then presumably I can try to kind of stabilize its price and make it into a stable coin. So yeah, it's possible. It's possible to do it here. But then again, I'm not advertising making stable coins collateralized by like low cap altcoins. So that's probably not the best decision.
Well, what you would want to do is you would have a basket of these, right? A basket of Hoyu deployed ones, and then you can create like I don't know, that would be like the dream, right? You have a stable coin that can have any sort of collateral as long as it's backed by a Hoyu oracleless, dependency-less protocol, then it could sort of work, right?
It's definitely possible to think in that direction, but there you also like uh, have to think about uh, correlations. So for example, like all these altcoins their prices are highly correlated.
Yep.
So if one of them is going down, then it's likely that the others are going down as well, which then means that your basket is not much of a basket. It's just like a single entity. So like if somebody came up with a way to prevent these problems, then I think that yeah, why not? It's definitely possible to build a stable coin out of similar mechanics.
Nice. Cool. Well, I'm glad I sort of got most of it, hopefully, down. Another question would be like, as you were building this, what would be, how has your thoughts changed over the past year on oracles and lending protocols in general?
Yeah, so there is always this kind of duality between doing like one thing that only is isolated to that particular use case, or as opposed to that, you could try to do something much more universal and try to cover like many more use cases. So I think that oracles are very good at covering these many use cases. And it's kind of depressing that oracles are still used very narrowly. So for example, I could easily come up with a lending protocol which requires not only a spot price oracle, but also some sort of liquidity oracle. So that's possible, but nobody's doing that just because, well, not sure why, but that's just the status quo. So I think that oracles do have lots of use cases, and like, okay, the reason why I'm building this in an oracle-less way is because I want to be self-contained. Had I not wanted to be self-contained, I would definitely consider like different ways to push data on chain to do some computations off chain and then like use their result to kind of optimize the system. So that would have been very useful and would probably have saved us like a lot of time. But that's not the quest that we're on.
Yeah. Yeah, like if you had some sort of off-chain oracle that was here, then you had the lending market, and it would just basically pass over. It could be cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about liquidity at the end, but liquidity is this ill-defined concept in general. In terms of Uniswap V2 markets, this is very well defined. You have like some number, which is like the two numbers that represent your reserves, and that's your liquidity. That's it. But when it comes to different markets of different types, like V2, V3, and then centralized exchanges or order book markets, then the concept gets much more blurry, and that's where like professional traders and so on, and professional liquidators, that's where these guys come in. So it's definitely interesting to work on that, and it's a field which is very, very deep and interesting, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, I always say that the space has almost unnaturally high liquidity given how little used a lot of this stuff is. You know, people are paying for market makers and stuff like that, and it's you know, you have really high liquidity on an asset that one party controls 90% of. It's like just absurd. But yeah,
Totally agree. I mean, this is again this implicit versus explicit narrative. If somebody just puts their like some tokens and some USD into some pool, then it's pretty explicit. You can just check that a single address did that, and that single address just controls all of the LP tokens. Now, if they do the same on a centralized exchange, that's way less clear.
yeah. No, I mean, we have you know, like a lot of times people, like whenever we talk with customers who want Oracle data, it's usually a red flag if you know, like if you're a lending market and you would say like, oh, we're going to use the current spot price in a DEX, like everyone would be like, no, don't do that. That's an awful idea. Or even if all the liquidity was just on one centralized exchange, that's still an awful idea. But this is sort of like saying, no, that can work as long as it's sort of tightly correlated. So it's like sort of a different approach.
Yeah, I mean, it's a completely different approach. There is even this website saying like, should I use like spot price as an oracle? And the answer is, of course, no, you must not do that. But a lot of assumptions goes into that. And I think that one of the assumptions that is crucial is basically assuming the current architecture of popular lending markets like Aave and Compound. If you make that assumption, then using any sort of spot price is not a very good idea. But the space is much wider than that. I mean, it's possible to do with much worse data, much worse liquidity. And I mean, the existence of NFT lending markets is maybe a good kind of data point saying that even with no liquidity, virtually no liquidity, you can still do some lending and borrowing. Like, okay, the lenders are less protected then, but it's possible.
Nice. Yeah. So, in which other lending markets are doing a good job, and what other big errors are they making, would you say?
Well, I mean, I think that different lending markets are kind of trying to target different niches. So the big ones like Aave and Compound, these guys are going after big tokens. I mean, from other lending markets, Euler has a particularly interesting approach. I mean, okay, they got hacked, but I mean, it did not have much to do with the mechanics of the lending market itself. I mean, I have a lot of respect for them just because they thought very deeply about like what is an oracle, what's a spot price, how can we use those, like what is a good liquidation. They even had these partial liquidations, which I think is, well, very cool. So they did a lot of innovation, and I mean, they're working on the second version of their market, so
Yep.
it's going to be really interesting to see like what comes out there.
I think he's like, yeah, one of the only other lending protocols I had on the deep dives. So
Oh, that's cool.
yeah.
I'm in a good company then.
Yeah, well, he was this was pre-hack, so if anyone wants to go see how the earlier ones worked. But no, this was great. Anything else you want to say? You know, where can people find out more?
Yeah, so we are at hoyu.io. It's okay. Maybe one more random thing that I might mention is
Yeah.
that Hoyu, it's a word in many languages, but like the reason why it's the name of this lending protocol is because there exists a similar word in this ancient, non-existent by now Proto-Indo-European language, and it means something like a long time. So we are kind of aiming to build something that really lasts and that can last without kind of prodding it by governance or by strange incentives and whatnot. We just hope to build something that is robust and that can kind of stand on its own in the blockchain.
No, love that. That's super cool. But yeah, Hoyu.io, everyone go check it out. Jogundas, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nick. It was my pleasure.